What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Lazy Goldmaker video. So today we're gonna take a first look at PTR for 9.2 and discuss a little bit about legendaries and how they might look, because we have enough information to start making some predictions. Definitely we don't have the full picture yet as far as figuring out which slots are going to be the most important ones or the most popular ones. But we do have some information that we can start making some good ideas. So that's going to be great. So yeah, let's dive into it. So the first thing, obviously, I'm expecting huge sales for legendaries in the early part of 9.2, particularly for people upgrading to the new rank. This has been the case with every patch for Shadowlands so far. The week where you could first equip rank 3 or rank 4 legendaries during 9.0, sales were absolutely incredible. The same happened with the rank 6 legendaries in 9.1. And a very significant portion, a surprisingly large portion of your total sales, total expected sales from 9.2 is going to come within the first couple of days, first week that people can equip the new rank 7 legendaries. So this is an important fact to just be aware of. Like, Shadowlands patches in terms of legendary gold making have been incredibly front loaded in terms of the potential. So you want to be there day one as soon as possible. Now, I haven't looked at everything on the PTR, so I don't know how to unlock it. We're going to start by just speculating a little bit about things like which slots are going to be popular, look at how gearing is going to work a little bit with what information we have available, and then take it from there. Crafting legendaries in 9.2 looks like it's going to work pretty much exactly the same as in 9.1, except we're going to get a new vestige, the vestige of the Eternal. Now, the most important thing to note about the vestige of the Eternal is that regardless of profession, it primarily uses the new materials from the new zone. So we're right now on blacksmithing, and it takes 40 progenium ore, 15 shadowghast ingots, which isn't going to be much in the grand scheme of things, and then 2 progenitor essentias, which also come from the new zone, presumably in a similar manner to how quartzite crystals are generated right now. Jewel crafting, pretty much the same thing, except this one takes essences, progenium ore, and progenitor essentia. So this is going to be primarily driven by the cost of the new materials. So some things you can guess right now just by looking at these two. I'm not taking a deep dive, but if you just look at at blacksmithing and jewel crafting, this one takes 40 of the new ore, and the jewel crafting one only takes 10. And then it requires essences instead of shadowghast ingots. I haven't done the math on the essences, but it's very likely that jewel crafting is going to be cheaper just because it straight up requires 30 less progenium ore, and this is probably going to be a heavy bottleneck early on. This is also needed for the crafters marks that are going to sell really well, and buy a lot of things essentially. That is going to be something we'll math out at a later date to figure out exactly what vestiges are going to be best. For my blacksmith jewel crafter, it does look like the jewel crafting one is probably going to be a little bit cheaper, but we'll have to check what the current prices are on essences versus shadowghast ingots to get an idea of that. Okay, so I changed my mind and I very quickly did the math on the ones that we can figure it out for, which is these two. Right now, the essences have a region market value on EU of 3,500 gold, and the 15 shadowghast ingots has a region market value of about just under 2,000, 1,950 gold. So with that, if progenium ore is worth more than 50 gold per piece, then jewel crafting is going to be significantly cheaper. So that's the case. So most likely jewel crafting is going to be cheaper. On my realm specifically, things are a lot cheaper, so definitely check it out on your realm, but that's something you can very easily do the math on. Just calculate the cost of 2 of each essence and compare that to the cost of 15 shadowghast ingots, and then you have an idea of how much progenium ore is going to be, or how important the progenium ore price is going to be for the total value in this market. Obviously, I expect the new materials to be a very heavy bottleneck for all legendary crafting. It does not seem that we have information on the specific item level of rank 7 legendaries yet, but I'm assuming that they're going to be an upgrade over mythic gear, because otherwise they will just feel absolutely horrible to equip. They're only adding 1 rank, which I think is a good idea, because with how they ended up making rank 5s and 6s, rank 5s were completely pointless. If we could have equipped rank 5s on week 1, then maybe they would have had a useful niche to fill. But as it were, you would get rank 5 and then rank 6 directly the week after, and with the extreme cost, it was just like completely pointless. Now tier sets are coming, and I'm logged into my Warlock right now on the vendor. And as you can see here on the set bonus, at least for cloth, the tier set covers 5 slots. So you can skip 1 of these slots, but you can't skip 2 of them, and that's important. The other important part is that these 5 slots cover all of the 3 big stat slots: legs, shoulders, chest. Now that does mean that 1 of these slots, since the set bonus is 4, the best maximum set bonus, everyone that can will pick either a legendary for legs, chest, or head. Not shoulders. Legs, head, or chest. These 3 have the most stat budget, and assuming that rank 7 legendaries are going to be better in terms of stats than the mythic gear from the raid, then we can guess that everyone is going to want, if they can, they're going to want legs, chest, or head. Whichever stat their best legendary can be applied to, if any can be applied. Now this was not the case in 9.1, but I do expect that particularly heads and chest pieces are going to make a huge return. It all depends on what classes are going to be meta and what the best legendary combinations are going to be, which we don't know yet, but that's the general gist of it. I think that's the most important thing here. The tier sets will not put the same limitations on gearing as Shards of Domination did. Due to how Shards of Domination worked, where you actually wanted all 5 slots, they locked you completely out of putting legendaries in those slots. But with how this is looking, I think a lot of people will be looking to move back to their 9.0 bis slots if they have the same legendary, or they're going to move to their legendaries to these high stat slots. That's absolutely certain. So there are a couple of slots right off the bat I think that we can assume are going to be losers in 9.2 in general. Necklaces, rings, capes, bracers. You're only going to pick those slots if you're forced to. Of course, rings were pretty good in 9.0, relatively speaking, but all those slots I mentioned have the lowest amount of stats. Rings are a special case because some specs might scale very spectacularly with secondaries, but overall people are gonna move away from those, and they're gonna pick the ones with high main stat, which means the rest. It means belt, shoulders, legs, head, chest, hands, and feet. Those are gonna be the priority slots for most people. Now another important change with 9.2 is that you can equip 2 legendaries, but it works in a very specific way. You can equip the Covenant specific legendary and another legendary. Now this one is complicated by something that's not yet on the PTR, so we don't know fully, but we do know that you're going to get, from doing Sereth Mortis, you're going to get a belt that gives you a legendary power that automatically swaps to whatever your current Covenant is. So obviously a lot of people are going to get that and use that. And most likely they will prefer to have it on that slot. What we don't know is if it can be placed on another slot or not. Just looking at my Warlock legendaries, for instance, my Covenant specific legendaries are across a wide variety of slots. Some, like the Necrolord one, can be crafted on legs. So depending on what spec you're playing and where your other legendary that you wanted to play could be crafted, you might want to put this one on the legs and something else on your hands or whatever. It all depends on what your spec you're playing. And if you can place this swapping rune power on one of the 3 big slots, I think a lot of people are going to prefer that because it just makes it easier. Then you always have that regardless of spec. You're going to have a big stat piece. You don't have to swap around. So if that's possible, then that's going to be whatever slot you can craft that in is going to be very, very strong seller. But we don't know that yet. At least I couldn't find it on the PTR. So we'll just have to wait. I have not played through any of the new quests or anything yet, so I don't actually know like how far you have to go to get the belt, for instance, or how you unlock it. So there is that, but that is looking the case. And obviously you can only have one of the big stat slots, so it is going to vary quite a lot by spec. But I think in general people are going to prefer to have their Covenant power on one of the big slots if they can, because that just makes gearing overall easier for them. And then they'll place their their secondary on another slot, but it all depends on how they can maximize their stat value from the 2 legendaries that they're most likely to be using, and they might even want 2 swapping legendaries, depending on how the legendaries for their off specs are and whether or not they want to play off specs. There's a lot of interesting ways that people are going to be optimizing their characters, because as always, players want to maximize, they want to optimize. At all points, and with free Covenant swapping being a thing, it's going to be even harder, and that's something we'll just have to look at when the patch is a little bit closer, is when we can start mapping it out more in depth exactly what slots are likely to be good. One thing that is going to be interesting, however, is seeing how expensive these legendaries turn out to be. So obviously in 9.1 legendaries, rank 6 legendaries were very, very expensive. Now, personally, I don't think it was that bad, because most of the cost was from Korthite crystals, and if you just played Korthia, you'd probably get enough Korthite crystals for a legendary, for a rank 6 legendary. It was 40 Korthite crystals. I know Haya had about that amount on my Warlock by the time I needed to craft a rank 6. This time around, the costs are a little bit different, because there's more focus, a little bit more focus on the new materials, and not so much on the new Korthite crystals. Of course, this is just first build of the PTR, so we don't know. And we do not know how easy it is to get these Progenitor Essentias. But the Progenium ore and the other materials that are used in the legendary vestiges, they're going to be very, very expensive early on. It all also depends on when exactly we can actually get the rank 7 legendary. Like, what do we need to specifically unlock to upgrade our legendaries to rank 7? Which, as far as I know, is not really known yet, because this is just the first build. Now, I don't really like playing around a lot and doing quests on PTR unless I absolutely have to. So I'm going to wait a little bit to see if I need to go through some of the progression to figure this out. But that is going to be very, very important to know, because that's going to sort of have an impact on how expensive it is. Now, there was a lot of backlash about how expensive legendaries were for average Joe players back in 9.1. And Blizzard might be trying to do something about that. And the only way to really do that is to increase the availability of materials early on. Because most crafters buy their materials, and then we sell the items for a higher price than we bought the materials for. If you drive up the abundance of materials and drive down the price of materials, then you're also going to drive down the price of finished items. So that's something that will be very interesting to see. Another thing that's going to be interesting to see is if any of the new materials turn out to be extremely cheap, and turn one of the vestiges into like the clear best option. Generally speaking, the cost of leveling recipes is such that swapping around is probably not viable for most people. So I doubt we can take any big advantage of it. It's more going to figure out what the cheapest options you have on your combination, and I think a lot of people are running the same combination I am, with blacksmithing, jewel crafting on one, and tailoring, leatherworking. For tailoring, leatherworking, it'll just be figuring out, is leather or cloth cheaper, and then for our good friends here, we'll just have to, it'll be a balance between the essence cost and the Progenium ore cost, which will be interesting to see, and it's probably going to change over time which are the best vestiges for this combo. So we are going to need quite a bit of the normal materials for crafting rank 4s. So that's going to be the main thing to really stock up on and make sure you have a good stockpile. Is everything needed to craft rank 4 base legendaries, particularly for the slots that are looking to be the best ones. And figuring out the optimal things to stock up on is something we'll have to push a little bit down the line. Because we can't know that until we start seeing some more testing coming out on balance changes to specs, changes to legendaries, what the meta classes are looking like they will be in 9.2. And what the BIS legendary combinations and BIS Covenant legendary combinations are going to be. Once we figure that out, then we can do the statistics and figure out what slots have the most specs that feed into it, and you can even add the population data for specs. Of course, that's going to change a little bit between tiers, but there are some interesting things we can do there once we know or have a good idea of what the most likely best in slot powers are going to be. So that's something I'll be taking a look at in a later video when we're getting a lot closer to the patch. So if we're already there, then there should be a link up here. Otherwise, you'll just have to wait and we'll get there eventually. So for my closing thoughts, well, I think Legendaries are going to be very, very profitable in 9.1 as well, or 9.2, I mean. I'm expecting this to be the main market to make money. This is where I'm going to try to make the push to make the final 50 million. I'm going to be ready with materials. I think figuring out the right slots and be ready with loads of materials for those specific slots is going to be very, very important. Doing things like having just thousands upon thousands of Shadowghast ingots, enchanted materials ready to go so you can focus as much as possible on crafting and posting during the very, very lucrative early days and weeks of the patch is going to be important. Obviously, this doesn't even cover the material demand that's going to come from Crafter's Mark gear. Crafter's Mark gear was incredible in 9.1. I think it's going to be the same with the Crafter's Mark of the first ones. We'll do a separate video on that as well, but they're building on the system, so you need rank 4 legendaries to be in the game, and if you are, probably going to be able to make a bunch of money in 9.2 as well. So yeah, let's get after it, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys.